Hey, welcome, buddy, to the hangout that I was going to have some time ago, but I never got a chance to. So I thought today would be a perfect day to do it because tonight on the Non Sequitur Show, we are actually having the Masonic Manic on to talk about Igtheism. And well, I haven't really come to a position on Igtheism yet as it being a viable position or not. I've actually got some competing ways of looking at it. And so before I go on tonight with him, I kind of wanted to get your guys' maybe uh impression of Ichtheism and maybe some feedback on it, because there's two different ways I can go on this, and I'm not quite sure which one is the more appropriate way to do it. And I'm going to kind of go over that a little bit with Christopher here. He's been talking to me a little bit about it, and anybody else who wants to join, by all means, let me know. I'll give you the link. And we'll kind of go from there. So anyways, let me kind of like jump right into it of what Ichtheism really is. And for those of you guys who don't know, Ichtheism is a position that basically says that all God talk is meaningless. And they say it's not cognitively meaningful. And what they mean by cognitively meaningful is very specific. Normally, when you have something that is propositional, you'll say that that proposition has cognitive meaning such that you can say the proposition is true or false. So if I say it's raining outside, that is either true or it's false. It's cognitively meaningful. But to the ichtheist, that word God has no cognitive value. So it doesn't really mean anything to them. And it's not really the same as theological non-cognitivism. It's related, I would think, a little bit, but not exactly the same thing. Because a theological cognitivist will say that the whole proposition, God exists, is not even a proposition. The easiest way to relate it would be to kind of compare it to would be moral propositions. So saying that stealing is wrong is propositional. That could be true or false to a moral cognitivist. But to a moral non-cognitivist, that statement, stealing is wrong, merely transmits or translates more to stealing boo, right? That'd be emotivism. That's a propositional attitude that I have towards towards what stealing is, right? But stealing boo is not true or false, right? So that's not a proposition. Or prescriptivism, which would be stealing is wrong, translates to don't steal. Right? Don't steal isn't true or false either. That's not propositional. So when we're talking about cognitively meaningful, we're talking about propositionally for the most part. So when it comes to the ichtheist, I have a couple reasons why I don't right now think it's too viable a position. And then you guys can kind of weigh in on it. So one, the reason why I don't think from the get-go that ichtheism is that viable, because the ichtheist is saying that the term God doesn't have any cognitive meaning, in which case they kind of put aside 2,000 years of theological conversation, right? People have talked about these concepts for thousands of years, and to say that it has no cognitive meaning to me is hard for me to wrap my head around, because if they're able to differentiate something like a Norse god from a Greek god, they have a cognitive meaning to it, right? So if a person who's an ichtheist says, I don't know what you mean by God, I don't have any concept of that, but they're able to differentiate between a Greek god and a Nordic god, then that clearly, to me, indicates they have some kind of cognitive understanding of the term. So right off from the get-go, I think that ichtheism is kind of nonsensical in that way, that somebody who's coming to a conversation to talk about God's existence and existentiality and the principle that there's something supernatural, to me, indicates they've at least read some things on the topic. They've at least been in conversations where they've been asked the question, do you believe in God, or does God exist? And for them to outright just say, well, you know what, that's meaningless to me, then the question I have to them is, why are they in the conversations? If I don't know anything about math, why am I weighing in on math conversations, right? So why would an ichtheist even bother to be in any theological conversation if they have no idea what God means? And I keep telling them, if you don't have a God concept, go read the literature, go read something. I mean, Christopher's got books on Thomas Aquinas. I'm sure they probably tell you that Aquinas has some pretty stout views on a deity, right? And or Anselm or any of them, right? So go catch up with the rest of the class if all you're going to be saying is that, well, it doesn't mean anything. Christopher, so far, so tell me what you think about that so far before I get into the two different ways you can approach ichtheism, from Dr. Opie's way, and then from does it even make sense to say that it's non-propositional.
I'm on board with you. Honestly, I'm of the opinion that that Igtheism in and of itself, to me, is actually just a cop out. I've not like the whole notion that you're going to get into an argument and then say that I don't know what you mean by God. I don't think that any concept of God is unambiguous and therefore I don't know what it means for there to be a God. I think that's just a cop out, because at this point everyone knows at least one concept of a deity.
Yeah, you know, and even if they just thought of one deity, they have a concept.
Yeah.
So that's where I do agree with you. I think it is a cop out, because, you know, I get in these situations where somebody just says, well, if you get in a conversation with a theist, they need to define what a deity is. Well, why? I mean, I don't understand why they need to define what a deity is, when I think that anybody who's involved in these conversations has at least a basic understanding of what a deification is. You know, a deity that I would say can prescribe laws of the universe, change laws of the universe, something along those lines. And if somebody doesn't want to accept that, that's fine. They don't have the conversation. But I think it takes multiple steps backwards for them to sit there and go, okay, let's define what we mean by God. I don't want to waste my time with that. I don't think that's really productive. I think that the conversation has moved on way past that. Right. And I think that if somebody doesn't come to the table with some basic understanding of what it means to be a God or be a deity, then they're way behind the rest of the class, and they just need to catch up, because who wants to waste their time on the definitions of what God could be? I don't get that.
Right. At this point, what they're wanting to do is just bog down the conversation in semantics rather than actually get into the meat of the conversation. And my position is that they do that because they don't actually have anything to add to the actual meat of the conversation. So they're just going to bog it down with semantic bullshit.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that a lot of them don't understand the arguments, and so they rather just, you know, kind of retreat into some kind of rhetoric, and that's what I think is a waste of time. Because if I was a theist, I wouldn't want to spend my time wasting it going, okay, let me explain to you what a deity is. That's not the conversations to be had anymore. I mean, anybody who reads the books on these topics, they don't sit there and go, let's explain what a deity is. It's like, does God exist? Let's talk about if God does, God doesn't, what, you know, the beliefs upon that. But they all have some basic understanding of what they mean by a deity. So I think Igtheism is just a retreat into rhetoric, in my opinion.
Yeah, like any single person that has had any rudimentary introduction to any philosophy at all has come across concepts for a god, whether it be Descartes' conceptions of a god. He has multiple in the Meditations. Aristotle, Plato, the Stoic philosophers, like or you know, if you've sat in church, you have had you have a concept of a god. So it's absolute nonsense to say that you don't know what it means, because you do.
I think so too. Like I said, if they can understand the difference between a Greek god and a Roman god, they have some kind of concept. Period. I mean, how can one argue that it's not cognitively meaningful if they're able to make that kind of differentiation?
Yeah, I don't think they can. I think that they're just doing. I think that in the end they're just doing it just to. Well, I think actually part of it is so that in addition to them having nothing to actually add to the conversation, it's also that they basically want to chase off the theist. So if the theist refuses to define what they mean by God, then the Igtheist can tout, well, they can't even define what they mean, so I win, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's a really bullshit way of doing it, right? It's like, I win by default because you can't even define something. Well, again, what do they expect the definitions to be? I am fine with any kind of stipulated definition. If whatever somebody wants to work with, I'm okay with that, right? They're gonna posit something, and they're just gonna say, well, you know, it's a being that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe, because that's the kind of what I go by, and that's my own personal stipulative definition, and not found anywhere else I'm aware of. I'm sure it might be, but I mean, I just kind of run with it. That's good enough for me. That is how I look at that word. When I see that word God, I'm looking at it cognitively meaningful in the case that God exists, is propositionally true or false, in such that a being that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe. So I'm relating it propositionally. So to me, it is cognitively meaningful. So getting past that, then you run into two other possibilities. Dr. Graham Opie argues one way, And I'm still trying to wrap my head around the way he argues it. I'm not saying he's wrong by any stretch of imagination. He makes a good argument, but I'm not seeing the entailment. And what he says is that Igtheism, if you say that is cognitively not meaningful to talk about if God exists, it inherently is a contradiction of sorts, that you're saying that God is meaningless to talk about, yet you're talking about it. So he kind of argues that if you're going to retreat into Igtheism, that all God talk is meaningless, then you might as well say that it's false and that you're a strong atheist, right? Because a strong atheist would say that gods don't exist. But I don't necessarily see the entailment there. Now, I'm not saying Dr. Opie's wrong. He's a brilliant man. I personally, I've talked to him, but I haven't talked to him about this. But I haven't understood why the entailment per se. You know, if you're saying that it's cognitively meaningless, he's saying that means that the proposition is false, and I'm not quite sure how that follows.
Yeah, I'm not sure it follows in that regard. I was thinking of it more analogous to like the solipsist issue. So, like, if I were to say you don't exist, but I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm basically affirming you exist because it's a performance contradiction.
Okay. Well, see, it kind of is and it isn't, because I can actually say that you don't exist, but I'm going to treat you as if I do. To me, a performance contradiction would be more that saying that I am dead is a performance contradiction, because if I was dead, I wouldn't be able to say that. So it basically, it in itself is a performance contradiction, because let's see, I'm not dead. And, oh my goodness, I'm getting messages left and right.
There's actually there's a guy called Truth Seeker in the chat right now. He's I think he's an atheist. I think we have an atheist here in the chat.
Do I know? I think I know him. Who was the atheist we had on a few months ago? I didn't really get a chance to talk to him much. He had a debate with somebody, and I don't remember his name, unfortunately.
Truth Seeker says, I think the only cop-out are atheists and theists because they claim to know without proof, which that's just wrong.
That's wrong. Yeah, that's just flat out wrong.
An atheist believes that there is no God. A theist believes there is a God. That has nothing to do with knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know why people keep changing the propositional attitude, right? I mean, the whole thing on theism and atheism is that they are belief positions, and yet people seem to want to like change that from a dosastic thing to an epistemic knowledge claim. And that's not what they're claiming. Now, can they? Sure. A theist can claim that they know God, and an atheist can claim that God doesn't exist, right? But that's neither here nor there. I mean, they're not required to do that, to be one or the other, right? The only requirement to be a theist is to have a belief that there's a God, not that a knowledge.
Oh, and apparently, according to him, these Greek philosophers are suspect for junk science and junk philosophy. Dude, you wouldn't stand 2 seconds against those Greek philosophers. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, people are on their shoulder of giants with the Greek philosophers. Even the analytical philosophers, you know, all that came from the Greek. So,
and even to this day, we still use Greek philosophy and some of the ancient Greek science act in modern science. So, yeah, you're just wrong.
So the other way to look at it, though, I mean, the one way would be that all atheists fall under strong atheism. That's Dr. Opie's thing. But the other way to look at it is that if atheist is saying that it's not cognitively meaningful, then what position do they really fall under? I would argue that it's a non-position, but it isn't atheism, because I have a little argument that I go by that theological non-cognitivism is a non-cognitivist position. Clearly, it's self-explanatory, right? Non-cognitivism, it's non-cognitivist. And I argue that atheism would be a cognitivist position, even in the weak case, right? And think about this, Chris. Even in the weak case, you can show logically, like not believes P, which means that it has to be propositional. And if it's propositional, it's cognitively meaningful.
Right.
So even in the weak case, atheism is a cognitive position. And to subsume theological non-cognitivism under that makes no sense to me, because then you have a category error, because now you're saying that a cognitive position entails or includes a non-cognitive position, and I don't see how that happens. How do how do you put a non-cognitive position in a cognitive position?
Yeah, I think that I think if they want to say that's a non-cognitiveness position, then it is ultimately going to be self contradictory. Because I mean I think that it ultimately becomes they ultimately actually try to insinuate a cognitiveness position the minute they enter the conversation. Because it's the only way that they're even going to be able to talk about it.
Well, I think that even coming to the table, you have to have some kind of base understanding. By the way, you're getting into a flame war kind of on my Facebook page with Dr. Moran. He's Dr. Lawrence Moran. He's from he owns the Sidewalk blog. He's a biochemist from Toronto, and he's a friend of mine on Facebook. And he's having at it with you on my page right now, but you can get back to him later. I actually like Sandwalk, but I don't know. He's been kind of going after me too, and I've been asking him questions, but he hasn't answered any of my questions. He just goes, "Okay, Steve, this, and this." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine, but here's my rebuttal," and he doesn't give me any rejoinder to my rebuttals, and I'm not quite sure why. But anyways, back to Igtheism. So tonight, the MMM is going to be arguing for Igtheism, and he's going to be arguing that it's a viable position, which is fine. I don't know if he includes it under atheism or not. And that's the problem I have, is that if Igtheism is a viable position, it would be atheism, but strong atheism. I don't know. I don't see how it'd be weak case atheism, right? Just a lack of belief. Because if you're going to say this, it's cognitively meaningless, then you don't know whether you have a lack of belief in it or not, right? You have no idea how to evaluate it. How do if I give you some German word for something, I don't know. You're not going to, well, you speak German, but other people are not going to know if they believe that or not, right?
Right.
Like, give me a noun in German.
Aschenputtel.
Yeah, I have no idea what the frick that means, right? So I don't know if I lack a belief in that or not. I could believe it. I could not believe it. I have no idea. It's not cognitively meaningful to me in that way, right? If you say, what's the word again?
Aschenputtel.
Aschenputtel. What the hell kind of word is that? German's a weird language. Yeah, Gesundheit. Thank you. Somebody in the live chat.
It means Cinderella.
Okay, so if that's if we make that into a proposition, and I'm just gonna say Gesundheit because I can't pronounce that. So Gesundheit exists. Okay, we're making it a simple proposition. I don't know if that proposition is true or false because I don't even know how to evaluate it. I don't know if I lack a belief in that if it exists or not. Now, that's just one way I could possibly argue it. I'm not dying on that hill. I'm not saying that's how it is because, again, Dr. Opie argues the other way. But I see value for both positions. I don't know which one at the moment seems to be the correct one as far as where to place Igtheism. Because a couple of philosophers place it to the side. They don't put it in atheism. They don't put it in theism. It's a separate category onto its own, much like theological cognitivists would have to be, I think, a separate category.
Yeah, I think it would actually have to go on a base by base set because I think it would depend on the person ultimately. Because if you're an atheist that truly holds to that non-cognitivist position, then you would not fall into either an atheist or theist category. You would not be able to fit into that, in my opinion. But then those who decide to actually get into the debates and stuff, they'd have to fall into one because they're turning it into a cognitivist issue by entering the debate.
And that to me says it all. If you're going to have these discussions, you're coming into the debate. You're actually in that regard saying to somebody, I want to challenge you on this. Therefore, I have an understanding of the topic, and I think it's cognitively meaningful. I don't see any point of an atheist talking about any of this stuff if they really believed it had no meaning, right? To me, an atheist wouldn't care about any of this stuff. They'd be like, it has no meaning, and they'd go play baseball or something, or football or golf or something. Why would they be involved in the discussions if they don't know what these terms mean? It'd be like me saying, hey, let's talk about math, but I don't know anything about math. I don't even know what math is. I don't know what a number is. But let's talk about math. It'd be like, well, why bother? If I don't know what a number is, I can't really discuss the topic.
Right. It'd be like saying, I think that 1 + 1 = 2, and then a guy says, what does 1 mean?
Yeah, exactly.
why are you in why are you even in the conversation if you don't know what one means and you're non-cognitivist about the number one? Leave.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I look at it. I keep people keep asking me, well, you have to define what you mean by it. Well, do I have to define what one means to somebody? Yeah, we could do it. Sure, I could tell you how number construction works a little bit, but why would I want to take 50 steps backwards to have a conversation with somebody if they're not on the same speed as everybody else? They don't know what one means.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, honestly, at that point, it's like trying to debate with a third grader. It's like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? Because they don't even have a vocabulary large enough to even have the conversation. Like at that point, it's like, is it even worth having the conversation at all? Because they're not even in it to even have a conversation. They're just in it to be frustrating, in my opinion.
And I think so. I think it's just like you said, some of these people may not really know the arguments very well, right? They don't bother to actually read anything. And this is why I'm getting frustrated because, yeah, I am hardly not even remotely close an expert on shit. But I like the topics and I've been reading a lot. I've been reading books. I've been reading papers. I've been catching up to speed a lot in the last couple of years, especially in the last few months, especially, more than ever. But when people don't even bother to read a paper and they're just, coming into the conversation to put, muck in the works, then why do I want to bother with that? I think it's futile.
Right. One comment just came up. Alexander K. He looks like he quotes from Wikipedia or something. Ignosticism or Igtheism is the idea that the question of the existence of God is meaningless because the term has no coherent and unambiguous definition. Where does it say people don't know?
Well, that's what it would imply if they don't know what it means, right? That would mean if they have no coherent or defined definition, they don't know what it means. That kind of seems self-explanatory.
Right. Like, okay, for example, if I were to define God as a supernatural pre-existent being that that can alter the laws of the universe, what is incoherent about
Nothing.
that? An atheist is going to claim that that is incoherent and that it's not able or it's ambiguous and can't be understood.
I don't know how that could be incoherent. Again, that's the working definition that I go by for myself in my mind when I see that word. I don't expect anybody else to do it. If they want to do, utilize that, by all means. I just think it's an easy way for me to understand the concept, right? So I have a working concept of what people mean by a deity.
Right. Someone just said it's incoherent as in it does not make any sense. It does make sense.
Why not? Yeah, why doesn't it make any sense?
Here's another one. What does not make sense about Thomas Aquinas's definition that a God is an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being?
No, nothing doesn't make sense by it. The only thing you could possibly argue with that is that if is a logical problem of evil.
Right. Or you get into like the paradoxical issues of omnipotence or something like that, but fundamentally it makes sense. He's omnipotent. He can do everything. He's omniscient. He knows everything. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between making sense and inconsistent, right? You can have, it makes sense to say, okay, God is omnipotent, omnipowerful, and omnibenevolent. Okay, that is not nonsensical, but it is inconsistent because all those things cannot be true at the same time. So in a logical system, to be a consistent logical system, all the propositions have to be able to be true at the same time. And if they can't be, then it's inconsistent. So yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not sensical, which by the way,
right.
is a word.
And it doesn't mean it's incoherent either. It is completely coherent. It is just that it is contradictory.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the live chat now. I was kind of involved in a few other things while speaking of this. So what overall is the positions they're having? Do they think Igtheism is a viable position? Do they think that it falls into strong atheism? Do they think that it is just a weak atheist position? Where do they kind of fall in line on those things? You've been following it.
Well, other than Truth Seeker, who's the only one I can tell that is an actual Igtheist or tries. I haven't seen anyone that actually seems to find it to be a legitimate position. I haven't kept up with all of them though, so maybe there is. I do appreciate the one guy that called it Igtheism. My parents made that joke earlier when I was talking about it. They're like, "Oh, you mean the idea that God is a fish?"
Ichthyism, yeah, ichthyism. Yeah, I was trying to get Graham Opie to kind of join us one of these days, and he says he will. I know he's a busy man. He said he's been busy, but he would be happy to join. He said he's quote always willing to talk about atheism and agnosticism with people. He just has to find it in his schedule. But I wanted him to kind of join us to talk about Ichthyus, because he specifically wrote about this in his book, Atheism and Agnosticism, which I think is a great book. I mean, I really did enjoy reading it.
Yeah, you'll have to send me a link. I would.
Yeah, it's a free book. It's from Oxford PDF. He even put it on his Twitter a long time ago. It's like, hey, free download PDF, check it out. And I took advantage of it, and then I got around to reading it, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. So certain parts I didn't quite follow, but for the most part, I mean, I definitely like the way he defines atheism and agnosticism, of course, because he uses philosophical terminology, and I follow line to that because I'm the Pope of agnosticism. Contrary to what Seth Andrews thinks. Love you, Seth. You're wrong. But I was kind of flattered that Seth actually gave me a personalized message. Steve, you're atheist. Seth, no, I'm not. You guys may not know this, but I actually asked Seth a long time ago off air, so you're gonna have to take my word for it. I don't care. But I'd asked him about these things, and he said, well, I look at it this way, basically. He said, do you mind if I believe that you're atheist in my own mind, do you have a problem with that? Right. And I'm like, well, no, because these are your thoughts, right? I'm not the thought police. You could think that I'm a freaking square circle for all I care. It's just that when people, go out of your way to label me, right, that's when I draw the line, right? And he was fine with that. He was like, no, I'm cool with that, whatever. Call yourself what you want, kind of thing. But then he goes on like Godless Cranium's channel with Shannon Q, and then he's like, oh, well, if you're agnostic, you're an atheist. Well, that's bullshit. It's not even just bullshit, it's complete bullshit. And it amazes me because I like Seth, by the way. I really do. And if he wants to think I'm an atheist, I'm okay with that. I think the fact that I like him and I don't want to make him unhappy. But when people say stuff like that, that's so fundamentally wrong from a philosophical point of view, it's just ridiculous, right? But they won't correct themselves, right? They won't actually read the literature, because he told me he's not interested in philosophy. He doesn't read anything about it, right? He doesn't read about agnosticism. And he'll make blanket statements like that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I give you peer-reviewed literature, I give you the journal citations, I give you the evidence, why is that any different than what you would ask for from like a creationist if they're positing something against evolution? You're willing to take those things on board when it comes to science, but you don't when it comes to philosophy. And I find that to be a little bit either hypocritical or cherry picking at the very least.
It's because no one takes philosophy seriously anymore.
Well, philosophers do.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, philosophers are a minority of the population.
Well,
at least ones that actually know they're philosophers.
This is true. I'm hoping to get some people in here that can kind of ask some questions. I'm trying to do this as a sounding board for my show tonight.
Yeah, I kind of want to get Andrew Kroll in here, but he's been somewhat interesting in the comments. So he says, to me, coherent means that it makes sense and you can understand it. And I'd argue that every definition of a god, really, you can understand for the most part, unless it's like a super abstract alien kind of concept. But
let me get serious in here real quick. Yeah, no, if I say, hey, a being that could prescriptively change the laws of the universe, how is that incoherent?
Yeah.
Clearly coherent.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it is ridiculous to say that like the Thomas Aquinas definition of God is incoherent. Everyone knows what that means. It makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, and if it was incoherent, then for thousands of years, don't you think somebody would point that out? Because I've never seen a philosopher go, oh, that's just incoherent. Well, it's not incoherent. You may not agree with it. And of course, I see problems with it as well, because I think there's a huge problem with having a bunch of properties, right? But that doesn't mean it's incoherent. It just means it's logically inconsistent. There's a distinct difference there to me.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. What I think what he's doing is conflating coherency and logical consistency together to make one conglomerate definition.
Somebody asked me, Manifold says, what does it mean to be able to change the laws in the universe? Okay, well, if speed of light is c and I want to make it a little bit faster, a little bit slower, right?
You alter the value of c.
Yeah, I can just alter that. I can say that F equals MA no longer applies. It's F equals MA plus something else, some other value we have to factor in, right? Call it a fudge factor, or something like that.
Yeah, or say like gravity. You want to say gravity on Earth is what, 13 meters per second per second?
9.8 meters per second squared.
Yeah. Okay. You decide that you're going to arbitrarily increase or decrease that by 5.
Yeah, and if God exists, all he has to do is change the fine structure constant. And oh my goodness, everything else changes. Like so many natural units change. Speed of light changes, permissivity, you name it. If you think of it, then the fine structure constant probably has something to do with it.
Yeah. Andrews responded, if it's not logically consistent, it means to me that it is not coherent. I can't understand something that is logically inconsistent because there's nothing to understand. That's nonsense. You can still you can understand something that is not logically coherent.
Of course.
You're a human being. 90% of what we do is incoherent, well, by your definition, incoherent.
Yeah, I don't know why they think it's incoherent. Ask him if he knows what a Greek god is. Give me the name. Can you name me a Greek god?
I finally got in, and I'd like to point out that if somebody gives you a definition and you understand the definition but you don't agree with it, it is coherent at that point because you had the ability to understand it to formulate a position.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's if
I ask you, name me a Greek god, can you name a Greek god?
Sure, Zeus.
Okay, coherent. There you go. Welcome. You're not an ichtheist. That's the way I'm looking at it. I mean, I may be oversimplifying, but how can somebody say they don't have a cognitive meaning of the word God if they can name one?
Like the closest thing I could grant is that maybe the idea of God that every human being has come out with is fundamentally wrong, and by that it could be considered some type of incoherent. But even then, that's being so loose with my terms that it's.
I wouldn't accept that as.
I wouldn't accept it even. I'm the one that said it.
Yeah, I wouldn't accept that.
Just because everybody's wrong doesn't mean they all didn't have a definition that could at least be articulated and argued for or against.
Yeah, I think people think that if it's like wrong, that it's incoherent, and that's not what it means.
No.
Right. He responded, yes, I can name several Greek gods. I defined them all as lies. Well, that means you understood them and then could form
for you to be you formed a position, which means they were coherent enough for you to form a cognitive position on it. They're not incoherent then.
Yeah, and Manifold said that is in response to you, Steve, when talking about altering laws of the universe. That is adding assumptions that any of what you're talking about is possible. How do you know any constants that we observe could hold any other value or be changed?
What is that? I don't understand this reason.
Has nothing to do with it.
Has nothing to do with anything. Why is it?
Not to mention, if you posit a god, as an omni trait,
they can do it.
Then it's within its power to do that. And just because, like, say that if I tune the speed of light, what the speed of light is, I tune it up by 5%, that would invariably affect everything else in the universe. But guess what? If I'm God and I have those omni traits, then I can definitely tune that speed of light up and also make sure that those other things that get messed with in the process are accounted for. It's within my power if it's omni.
Clearly. Yeah. So yeah, nobody has to demonstrate that it's logically impossible you could. I mean, if you think it's logically impossible, then go ahead, make a proof for it. I don't see how you could. Of course it's logically possible. If there's an omnipotent God, he can change the laws of the universe. That just kind of follows. I don't really see any argumentation to be had there.
Unless you'd like to limit that God to where he had to create it in a specific way, in which case it's no longer an omni-God, even if you want to try to define it that way.
Right.
That's just might as well slip into that.
Just asked, can you name another word that changes definition by everyone who uses it?
Come.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of words that have polysemous that have different definitions. You know, I mean, we talk in generalities a lot. People, one word can mean many different things to many different people in many different languages.
I'm going to just say the word idea.
I'll say the word theory.
Trying to find a consistent opinion on what idea means.
Actually, here's another one. Truth.
There you go.
Knowledge.
Those are, you know how many different theories of truth and knowledge are out there? I found theories. I literally in the last couple of months found theories of knowledge and truth that I didn't even know existed, like Tarski's theory of truth. I mean,
that one's fun.
Yeah, T-theory. Oh my God, semantic theories of truth are just ridiculously complicated.
I hate semantic theories of truth so much.
But I want to learn about this stuff, right? So I've been reading about these things, and so now I know what the semantic theories of truth are, right? I have a concept; they're cognitively meaningful to me in that regard. But I don't expect anybody else to know that shit, right? I just don't think they would bother with it. But I've realized over several months, maybe even longer, that there's a lot of shit out there that years ago I would have no idea about. Would have never guessed there was that many theories of knowledge and truth out there.
Yeah,
they do mean things to people.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to know is that if we wanted to really get into semantics and discuss that, like, there are arguments out there that nothing we say we can adequately, or nothing that we want to say we can adequately express because we can't directly correlate a meaning between what we have formulated in our brain to the words we're saying.
The minute that somebody has to interpret what we're saying, the filter automatically pollutes it every time.
Yeah, there's linguistic constraints because we don't have mind to mind.
Right.
I don't want to be in Steve's mind personally. No, I think that would be a terrible place.
I don't know. I think Steve's mind would be pretty interesting.
Oh, you don't want to see what's up there. But
it would be a mix of hot girls and philosophy.
That is true. You do know me. Wow. Good call.
And screaming.
Boobs is literally the meaning to everything. Never go wrong with that. But it's funny you mentioned about linguistic constraints, because like Hillary Putnam he argued like we're not a brain in a vat because of linguistic constraints, about that if we're pointing to an object that we say, okay, brain, if I have no reference of what a brain actually is to the external world, then I'm not actually pointing to something that actually exists outside of my epistemic framework. But of course that would assume that we weren't an actual person at one time, that the brain was taken out and put in a vat, because I think that kind of blows his argument. But I actually was doing a blog entry on brain in a vat, and it got so complicated that I'm only like halfway done, and I don't know how I'm going to finish it, because to really adequately explain the different ways of arguing against a skeptic for the brain in a vat, you have to get into what's called sensitivity, which is truth tracking of theories of knowledge, and that gets woefully complicated very, very quickly, I found out, and I don't have the skill set to really kind of explain it.
When you start grinding on the rails of qualia, you have problems. Those go in so many directions.
Well, I will have a hang on skepticism one of these days, because I think that a lot of people use the word skeptic inappropriately. I know what they mean by it, and they're using it in an ordinary sense, what's called ordinary skepticism. But I don't take the label of skeptic, because skeptic generally refers to skepticism, and skepticism is a philosophy, it's a school of thought that I don't adhere to. And even though there's many different versions of skepticism, Descartes has versions, Russell has versions, epistemic skepticism, a whole bunch of types of skepticism.
Yeah, I actually was a very stringent adherent of Cartesian doubt. If you can doubt something, you have reason to dismiss it.
The problem I have with Cartesian and Descartes is Descartes starts from the premise that God exists, and he therefore will argue that, for example, we're not a brain in the vat, because for the brain in a vat, well, his argument was Descartes' demon, but same principle, that we can't have this demon whispering in our ear that's maleficent, because God being good would not allow that to happen, and that's his way of getting around that. Of course, I don't start from that premise. So Descartes gets around skepticism starting from a premise that I don't have, right? Because he was a God believer. So for him to try to refute skepticism, I can't get into the Descartes way of doing it. Russell takes a different approach, and Moore takes a different approach that are a little more based on reason. But even then, I think Russell fails because he basically just uses a common sense approach that I don't think gets you around the skeptic's problem. Right?
I don't think a common sense approach is a good approach to anything, because you have to presuppose that everybody operates from the same common pool of knowledge, which is not the case.
Well, yeah, but then we get into problems with like theories of truth, right? If I say there's a coherent theory of truth or correspondence that, well, let's talk about causal theory. Like, for example, a causal theory will say that if I'm looking at Cirrus, then I know Cirrus exists because there's a causal relationship between me looking at him, producing a thing in my brain saying that he exists. There's a causal relationship there. But causal theories have an awful lot of problems when it gets into justified true belief and Gettier problems. So they fail on numerous accounts. So even things that we say we think we know because of causal theory like that don't always hold true. And that's where the skeptic comes in. The skeptic says, okay, you don't really have knowledge in any case. And I deny that. I think there are cases where we can't say we have knowledge, but an actual skeptic, if you're talking about philosophical skepticism or epistemic skepticism, they hold knowledge is not possible.
And I, even though I have the label skeptic on my channel, I don't agree with that assumption, because for me, my idea on knowledge is fairly simple. If you have a belief and that belief comports with truth, then you know it. Whether or not you know that you know it, you still know it. Knowledge being a subset of belief. As long as what you are believing is true, it is something that you know at that point. That's my take on it, at least. Obviously, at that point, you have to define truth, which gets into its own complications. But
that's almost like a pragmatic theory, though.
I am a pragmatist. What do you expect? What do you expect? If it is useful to me, then
no, I'm not against the pragmatic theory of truth. Don't get me wrong. I hold a pragmatism in many ways too. And the pragmatic theory of truth is simplistic in that regard, but it definitely, I think, is one of the weaker theories as far as what constitutes truth. So yeah, again, it gets real complicated real quickly about which truth theories you wanted to talk about. And it's funny is when I hear people say, well, I really hate philosophy and philosophy is bullshit. And then all philosophy does is talk about what is truth, what is knowledge, what is facts. These are defined. Knowledge, those words are actually defined in meta epistemology, like knowledge. It's defined in certain ways, right? So you're just saying, I don't like reason. I don't like logic. I don't like truth. I don't like facts. I don't like knowledge. That's what you're saying when you don't like philosophy. So that's all I hear.
What I hear whenever somebody says they don't like philosophy is that they don't understand it, or it's too complicated, therefore they don't like it. Guess what? I don't understand philosophy. I think it's incredibly complicated. I still have videos talking about philosophical topics on my channel when I did sit down and research things for hours and hours to get the data across.
But you actually do your research, and that's what bothers me. I know people have never opened a book in their life, going, "Oh, well, Steve's wrong." Okay. Well, I'm not going to put too much stock in what you have to say if you haven't even read anything on this. I'm really kind of flabbergasted, to be honest with you, and it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because I even posted this on Twitter. By the way, I think Twitter is going to be my new medium from now on. It's so convenient. You can direct message people, and it's just, you get quick thoughts out. It's like a mini blog, it's like microblogging in a way. It's 280 characters a piece, right? So I had posted something along the lines that when people just dismiss my arguments out of hand, when they've never even read them, it's usually one of 5 things. And Christopher, tell me if these are, and sir, tell me if these are not, seems to be the case, right? Almost every time when I ask somebody, well, what's really my argument? They don't know it. They get it wrong. They straw man it all the fucking time. I'm the king of straw man. They love straw man me, but it's usually this. So check it out. Ready? Number 1, I'm just a troll. That's like the first. You're just a troll, Steve. Okay, great.
Yep, I've read that at least 5 times on your post today.
You do troll, but that doesn't make you a troll. It's like you can lie, but it doesn't mean that you are a liar.
I prefer the term I I make people think that ends up being dumpster fires.
Yes,
but
and
I don't
that
do
is
so
also
duplicitously. I don't do so deceitfully, and I certainly believe everything that I say. If I was an actual troll, I wouldn't
true.
believe the shit that I say, and I would waste
you can believe the stuff you say and still be a troll. Like I can be a huge fan of Cocktobatovs and still throw them into dumpsters.
I guess that's fair enough.
Like trolling doesn't necessarily imply deceit; it just implies the chaos and cacophony that results from your action and whether or not you enjoy it.
And it implies that you're also just out to waste people's time.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. I think that's
closer. I would say that the wasting people's time
that's a key thing.
Is maybe closer to the willful deceit. Because I don't see willful deceit in trolling so much as I see the wanting to waste people's time.
Yeah, and I don't want to waste people's time. I actually want people to think, and I actually want people to look at these arguments and either evaluate them and think one way or think another way. I don't care, but at least look at them, right? Because everybody who's recently come after me for saying that my arguments are wrong, they have not either understood it, and I'm not even lying. I had one person say, well, I didn't read it. I didn't bother to read your argument because, you're already wrong. I'm like, how the fuck does that even follow? That makes no sense to me. But anyways, okay, so number 2 was I'm a closet theist. That's a new one.
Yep, seen that one today too.
Yeah, so I'm either a closet atheist or a closet theist. So I'm like in a state in between. I guess I'm like the somebody had sent me the Schrodinger.
You're one of those beginning to exist problems.
Yes, it's what Steve begins to exist between theism and atheism, right? I'm stuck in the middle with agnosticism for a reason. But yeah, it's weird. I was kind of taken aback on that one. I'm like, I'm a closet theist. How the fuck did you get that out of that?
I get that one all the time because I constantly am I'll constantly take a theist side if I think they're right, but it's like, oh, you're automatic theist.
Well, I told somebody today, I'm like, wait a minute, if the theist posits something that's physics and the physics is right, are you going to say that it's wrong just because of a genetic fallacy? Makes no sense. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Cyrus. To be a theist, you have to have a God belief, do you not?
That is kind of implied in theism. Even your subsets like deism still have a God belief. It just is further down the line.
Yeah, if I have a God belief, I'm not aware of it. So maybe I'm cognitively dissonant of my own. Yeah, what's weird?
You don't assign a truth value to the proposition of God. That doesn't make you a theist, and it doesn't make you an atheist.
Yeah, what's funny is Dr. Opie in that same book, he actually has an argument that he makes it very clear that agnosticism is no more near atheism as it is theism. And he's absolutely right. And I actually have a long drawn out argument for that. Granted, I haven't had that one really proofed, but it makes sense to me. So, hi, Brandy Lynn. Welcome. Brandy's over from Cinecus's channel. He's a game player. He plays Dead by Daylight. I think that's the game. I don't know. I don't play it. But anyways, hey, Brandy. Okay, so number 3, I'm a pseudo-intellectual. I love that one too. I was like, wait a minute. I've never claimed to be any intellectual, pseudo or otherwise. I don't know what the fuck that even means.
I think that I have never, except in rare circumstances, heard the term intellectual used in anything but a pejorative sense. With or without the pseudo. I don't usually hear it, especially here on the internet, without a pejorative connotation.
Yeah, so I can agree with that. It's almost like like being an intellectual in and of itself is a bad thing now.
It's like wanting. It's like, and granted, original meaning philosophy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just lovers of wisdom. So, lovers of wisdom automatically means intellectual. To some people, I guess, maybe that I could maybe make that work. And then pseudo-intellectual would imply what at that point, if we even grant the intellectual part being just connotated with philosophy.
It wasn't a pejorative when I was growing up. Intellectual just was somebody who, thought.
Yeah, but you live in the age of the internet now.
True.
Now the idea of somebody who's an intellectual almost always is conflated with your pseudo-intellectual, your fedoras, your armchair philosophers, like all of those monikers are all kind of like grouped into one area.
Kirks.
Your TJ Kirks, your Banana Mans.
I think that's a shame. And like I said, I don't get that. I've been on a long time. I have never claimed to have an expertise in a goddamn thing. Wouldn't you think that an intellectual would actually have some kind of expertise in something?
I mean, you're better at nukes than most of us.
But I'm not an expert in it. There's a huge difference. I have training in it, but not an expertise in nuclear stuff by any means.
Right. Like I have training in English, linguistics, German, and some philosophy. I am not an expert by any meaning in any of those fields.
I have training in video editing and graphic editing, so those are the only areas where my channel shines.
Oh, hey Sam! Somebody best combo says his name Sam. I don't think I'm doxing him, so but I'm sorry. I always call him by his first name. He says you haven't messaged. I may have missed your message, and I'll check because a lot of times I'll just hit the red button because I get messages, and I'm like, okay, I some of these people I don't even know who they are messaging me. I get too goddamn many messages anymore, and I'm not arguing. I mean, I'm not what's the word? I'm not unhappy about that. I like getting messages, but I really overloaded. I wake up in the morning and it's like I have like a dozen or more like Facebook messages across the bottom of my screen. I go to the Twitter. I've got 1,000 notifications. I've got 20 direct messages. I've got email coming up my ass. Sometimes I just kind of just by fiat to say, okay, read. So if I miss stuff, I'm sorry. But I get, what's weird is I get most of my messages like 3 o'clock in the fucking morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. I must have a lot of Europeans that watch.
Well, maybe. Yeah, I can see that partially like when you're by the time you usually do live streams at night, it's like 1 a.m. my time. Over in Europe, they're like, what, 6 or 7 hours ahead of us. So it's like early morning.
Like
they're 8 hours ahead of me.
On that, I am going to have to hop out because I just wanted to hop in here a little bit to weigh in on my ideas on Igtheism, which is that Igtheism itself was incoherent, ironically enough. But
so you don't really think it's that valid of a position, then?
I can understand the position, but I think that it's articulated in a malformed way, and that is its problem, is that it's malformed. Okay. On that, I have to do a thing with the Geek Room here in a little bit, and I also have to produce my video for tomorrow because stretching myself thin seems to be the one thing I'm good at.
Well, I invited Frankie to drop by, but he thumbed his nose up at me. So,
well, that's because Frankie's a douche.
He is. Yes. Hear that, Frankie? Okay. All right. So, by the way, let me go on. Let me finish these real quick, and I'll catch you later, sirs. So, sure. Number 4 is I'm a NASA shill. So that's another dismissal of my.
Oh, is that from the Flat Earthers?
Oh, I don't even know. I mean, these are things that people just dismiss my arguments outright.
I mean, you definitely are a NASA shill, though. So.
Well, yeah, that's supposed to be a secret, though. I don't know why. Like everybody knows this now.
It's just because you like the way the rocket dildos they send you feel.
This is well, okay. I'm going to plead the 5th. And then last but not least, I don't exist, so my arguments don't matter.
We've had an entire stream on that one, Steve.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
And I just recently had somebody argue the same thing. They're like, I don't have any beliefs. I'm like, so you don't believe that I exist, so why the fuck am I having a conversation with you?
Like,
and they didn't understand that.
It's like saying you don't really have a position. It's like, I do have a position. It's agnosticism. No, that's not a position. Yes, it is. It is a position that assigns no truth values. That still makes it a position.
One more fucking person says agnosticism has to do with knowledge. I'm gonna fucking I'm gonna lose my shit. Because okay, yes, in some ways agnosticism has to do with knowledge. Okay, great. Whoopee fucking do. It has nothing goddamn to do with the way the word is used when it comes to propositions.
No, when it comes to propositions, it's closer to the term ambivalent than it is knowledge.
No, I'm going to disagree with you because I think ambivalent would mean that I know you don't care one way or another, right? So I think there's a difference between not caring and not being able to assign a truth value of true or false, right?
I would say it's closer to that than a knowledge claim, though.
Well, it's definitely not a knowledge claim. If I say, look, I can't decide whether this proposition is true or false, so therefore it's agnostic on that proposition. Where the fuck does the knowledge come in? I'm not saying anything about knowledge. Now you can argue, well, it means I don't know. Okay, fine. In that case, it's relating to knowledge, but it's not a knowledge position. It's a belief position that you are not justified to say it's true or false. Simple as that.
And also when you're dealing with a term like ambivalent, it can mean uncertain, doubtful, or indecisive. that would be closer to the idea that it's just a knowledge claim.
I agree with you. Ambivalent can mean those things too. I mean, ambivalent could be you just have
it can mean you don't care, or it could just mean you're not certain. Like you're not certain
right
that a God does or does not exist, so you don't assign a truth value. So in that, I would say that the term fits it there, but it does have, like, even if you just look it up, there's about 20 different definitions for ambivalent. So it's a very loose.
I've looked it up before, and I've seen various things. That's why I'm willing to agree with you on it, because I've seen it defined in multiple different ways.
It's like the word can. Can is defined so many ways depending on how it's used in a sentence. It's horrible.
But when I ask people that question, okay, wait a minute. If you're agnostic on a proposition because you can't say it's true or false, how is that a knowledge position? And I get crickets every time. Now, one person has ever answered that question. So if anybody in the live chat can answer that, by all means, go for it, because that is not a knowledge position. You're not saying, I know I can't answer. You're just saying, I believe that I have no justification to, or I don't know how to answer. That's fine. You know? Oh, yeah. By the way,
Lucifer Almighty. The first 3 alt against you today alone.
Oh yeah, no, I don't make this shit up, dude. These are, everything I post is real life events. I have no creativity, and if I make something up, I'll even say that it's fake. But I mean, this is all real shit. But Lucifer Almighty, he says, go to the Atheist Experience live chat and say Gnosticism is a belief claim and see what the shit fly. Yeah, what they'll do is they'll block you. I shit you not. They will actually block you if you go to the Atheist Experience and say Gnosticism is a belief claim, or Gnosticism isn't atheism. I think that's kind of shitty, to be honest with you, that they're not willing to even entertain that position, because I know Lucifer Almighty thinks the way I do on all this. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think he even got blocked for saying something along these lines. Yeah, he got blocked on a stock account. So, I mean, I'm really disappointed in the Atheist Experience shutting down conversation like that.
To be fair, that has kind of become Matt Dillahunty's like call sign is, no, you're done.
Yeah, no, he did that to me. Yeah, he shut me down too. He's like, I'm done here, and I'm like, dude, all you did was come in here and say no in one thing, and then you're wrong on another. You didn't explain shit. All you did was say, oh well, you either believe or you don't believe. No shit, Matt. I understand that. I mean, it's like. And by the way, that only holds to classical logic. There's other forms which I was trying to explain, multi-valued and things like that. But I was like, somebody, I won't give into detail, but somebody said, hey, Steve, you might not be giving him the principle of charity. He may not have read your entire post because he's a busy man and not realize what you're trying to explain to him. And I told him this. I said, maybe you just didn't read what I was explaining, but let me try to reiterate what I was explaining. And and he went off on me going, oh, well, you just made an assumption. I didn't read your, what you wrote. Well, I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but if you want to be an ass about it, be my guest,
it's that's frustrating. Then again, I will be honest, there is a certain level of, what's the word for it? You start to become more abrasive the more abrasive situations you find yourself in, because it just kind of becomes how you have to operate. And Matt is in a lot of abrasive situations, so it might just be that's his default now.
I don't fault him. I have nothing against Matt. I like Matt, okay, and I understand, right? I do get it, right? And I think you're right. I mean, he's in a lot of conversations, and this is his default. But he knows who I am. He's been on my show. I would think that he would at least try to, give me a modicum of a minute to say, okay, let me try to understand his argument, because what he was arguing was nothing fucking to do with what I was arguing. I've never argued. That belief and not belief is generally the way it's thought of as far as classical logic, except for the thing that I wrote, in which I argued maybe a hypothetical case where you could have both, right? But that was just as a side note. But generally speaking, you believe or you don't believe,
And I just was a little bit disgusted by what I just read. The completely off topic for just a second, the video that I'm doing for tomorrow is a video on Peter Popoff, if you're familiar with him.
Oh, intimately. Yeah. I remember back in the 80s saying he was full of shit, and people were like, you're an antichrist, Steve.
And apparently he just changed his his business from for profit to religious in 2006. It wasn't until 2006 that he turned his ministry into a religious organization. It was labeled as for profit all the way up to that point.
Well, he's been a fraud even since the 80s, dude.
Well, I understand he's been a fraud to that point. It's just like, even like my roommate brought him up to me as somebody I should do a video on, because he's been doing shit again recently and it pissed him off. So he was like, hey, this is right in line with what you do with your channel. Can you maybe do something on this guy? And I'm like, sure, I can. And Inane Dragon was like, yeah, you need to. But as I'm looking through his information here, that popped up, and like I kind of wanted to throw up a little in my mouth, because I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me this guy was exposed in the 80s by the James Randi Foundation, and yet it wasn't until the mid 2000s that he actually had to finally change himself to change himself to a religious organization, suddenly giving him the tax exempt status. That bothers me. That bothers me a lot.
No, I agree with you. And you know what's funny is I take a lot of this shit for granted, and I'll be the first to admit that. I mean, it's some reason in my head, I think everybody knows about this shit sometimes, right? I think everybody knows what happened with the James Randi Foundation. That everybody's watched the video with Peter Popoff. That everybody understands the scanner and the earpiece with his wife. But you know what? A lot of people don't.
No, a lot of people don't, and he's actually got a freaking commercial selling water.
Miracle Spring Water.
Yeah, the Miracle Spring Water. And then the thing is that when you go in with that commercial and you get the free Miracle Spring Water, what he does then is he sends you all the letters asking for money once you get that spring water, and that's then his way around it.
Do you know what the actual loophole is? The actual loophole is he doesn't claim that the water has any magical properties. What it is you're showing faith to him and the ministry and to God, that by donating to them, by just giving them whatever money it is, that you're showing a faith, and the water's just a way of them,
it's like his fucking $300 faith seeds that he sells on his website. It's faith the same thing.
Prayer mats. Yeah, same bullshit.
Yeah. Now I'm going to be hopping off here so I can actually get the recording done for this video, but I just wanted to point out that change around happened in the mid 2000s, and that was a bit, I was already disgusted with the individual, but I hate that shit. I really made things way worse.
This is why I even mentioned to the Pope of anti-theism, God's cranium. I'm like, dude, I am really getting sick of this shit. Of people, of things like kids dying because parents don't want to give them, vaccinations. Parents don't want to give them blood transfusions. Parents rather pray over them than get them, actual medical attention. Kids starving to death because, religious reasons. I'm just at my wit's end, to be honest with you.
Well, remember that anti-theism is not an absolute position. You can take an anti-theist approach to religions that you find particularly harmful, and a soft-handed approach to the ones that you don't. I forget there's one particular person who I've quoted when me and Godless Iwan had a chat about this a while back, who actually takes that approach. He's a famous one, and that's where I've taken my approach from. So there is a soft-handed way to do it. You don't have to do the whole like, oh, religion is evil, it's all bad, blah 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 blah. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, send me details on that. I'm curious, because that's the kind of approach that I seem to be taking a little bit more.
I'll find his stuff here, and I'll send it to you on Facebook when I'm done.
Yeah, I can say I am not an anti-theist, really. I'm an anti-individual. I will hate individual people for what they do, and oftentimes they'll be using religion, but I view religion the same way I view a gun. It's a tool. And people misuse it.
I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm not an anti-theist as a whole, because I think religion as a whole is not detrimental.
I think it's quite useful, honestly.
But I think that people use it in detrimental ways, right?
Yeah.
No, and I can agree with that approach. That's kind of the same approach. My problem is that there's certain things that kind of come with it, because like with a tool, you can use it for self-defense in the instance of something like a gun. But when you've got, as an example, one of the Abrahamic religions that will preach sort of a more like absolutist approach, I don't see ways in many cases to make a case for that religion. Not all the time. There are some versions that are a lot more soft-handed, like when you take the henotheistic approach. I think that's what General Han Solo takes. You have an approach like that that's a lot more soft-handed, that's a lot more even. I'm fine with that.
I mean, he identifies with henotheism, but he's more of a monolateralist than anything else, which is pretty much the synonymous terms. But
yeah, they're completely identical in scholarship.
Yeah, I thought they're synonymous, but I think he personally uses the word monolateralist rather than henotheism. But yeah, I don't know of any distinction between them if there is. They seem to be.
I've never heard there being a distinction between the two.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I think that there can definitely be justification for religion in that, for example, promotion of community welfare.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. That is very consistent with a lot of religions. The problem is where individuals then take over and then reverse it, i.e. Hitler-esque type shit.
Or your Stephen
Catholic
Andersons
Church
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Matt Powell's and those pieces of shit in the world.
We actually did the stream I did today was actually starting a review on Matt Powell's movie that he just released.
I haven't seen it.
It's stupid. It begins with it. We were just like labeling logical fallacies as we went through. It began with an appeal to emotion, talking about the Columbine shooting, equating it with evolution. And then it did a bunch of quote mining, quotes that were actually misappropriated from their sources. Like if you look up most of the quotes they used in that movie, they're all misappropriated quotes. They're not actually quotes that historians agree are assigned to the people they used, with very few exceptions. But they use all the quotes as an appeal to authority. So I'm just like, okay, cool. Improper appeal to authority. There's another fallacy there. Boom. And then they hit, I forget which other ones they hit there, but in just the first 16 minutes, we found at least 4 that we were able to like consistently hit over and over and over again.
Oh, people using fallacies incorrectly. Shocking.
Yeah, I know, right? Bothersome.
Oh, yeah. And it seems to be getting worse and worse. I don't understand. There's so many people out there now that have videos explaining this shit. TMM has videos out there. Martimer81 has videos out there. I have videos out there. We've all explained these things, and yet people still out there going, appeal to authority. No, it's not. Straw man. No, it's not. Special pleading. No, it's not.
Or my favorite one is, okay, I got a fun story. In the, the cancer group, there was a guy who tagged me in a post accidentally because he was debating with another guy named Christopher Hansen. This other Christopher Hansen.
There's too many Christopher Hansens. Holy crap.
I know. Two Christopher Hansens, same group. This one is a complete nut job, like the exact opposite of me. Complete like hardcore theist, and he cries fallacy over everything.
Dude, I see that happen so often. I literally I'll be like having an argument like, oh, that's a fallacy of this. I'm like, do you understand that fallacy? Because no, that's not what it is. And when somebody does make a correct thing, for example, they'll try. For example, Cameron. If you guys know Cameron, he's what channel does he run? I can't remember. But he's a theist. And he's like, that's equivocation, Steve. And I was actually, well, no, it's not, because I specifically left out this to avoid equivocation issues. And then, of course, I don't hear anything back from them, right? Because I was aware of that. That's why I purposely worded it the way I did, right? So I wasn't charged with equivocation.
Well, it's like the video that me and Atheist Edge and Shannon Q and Prophet Azad, the multi-part series that we've been doing on Jim's channel, where we go over J. Warner Wallace's book, The Cold Case Christianity. When we've been going through that book, we grab a portion of the book, say the portion of the book, and then explain what we think they meant, and then explain the issues we have with that portion of the book. Just kind of doing a bit-by-bit review of it. And this person on Twitter started going, oh, it's poisoning the well. You guys are poisoning the well. And I'm like, wait a minute. So the fact that we had the quotes from the book first in their entirety and then explained the problems we had with it means that by every definition, it cannot be poisoning the well. Because to poison the well, we would have had to give what we thought about it and then show the quote from the book afterwards.
Wouldn't poisoning the well also be you try and dismiss the argument by insinuating going against the motives of the individual's writing?
Yeah, sort of. It'd be more. By the way, capturing Christianity. That's what I was trying to think of. I couldn't think of it. That's Cameron's thing. No, poisoning the well would be more like if I say something along the lines of, hey, I heard that you were arrested for drunk driving last night, and your argument that blah 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 is wrong. Something that's personally that's involved with you, that will be detrimental to the audience listening, thinking they have negative things about you that are completely irrelevant to the subject at hand or the argument at hand.
Okay, so it'd be like,
and it's got to be done before you actually talk about the argument, as Sura said, right?
Right. So it'd be like David Fitzgerald in his Jesus Mythicist book, where he dismisses scholars based on their Christianity. Not based on their arguments.
Hey, I hear you're an atheist, and so your understanding of morality is probably going to be pretty bad. That's poisoning the well, in my opinion, because you're basically saying to the audience, because this guy's an atheist, he must not understand morality.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of got me. Like, I don't like when people just call fallacy. I find it much more, especially because of the amount of times that people find out that they're wrong when they point out a fallacy, because sometimes they're just not right, as we demonstrated just here. Sometimes it's better to just steel man your opponent's position and tell them what you think is wrong with it in plain words. Because if you try to say fallacy, you probably might get it wrong.
And I do that all the time. And I think the only person I really know that doesn't often is Jim Hall from Atheist Edge. He'll still man. But I have the same problem. Like I was just talking to Christopher earlier. Dr. Moran is on my Facebook page, and he owns the Sandwalk blog. And he's throwing out special pleading fallacy to me. And I'm trying to explain to him, well, not
is it on your first cause thing that you put up there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And on my Facebook page. Me too. But I've explained to him, no, look at Doc. It's not special pleading for the fact that if a theist is positing that all things that are contingent require an explanation as per the principle of sufficient reason, that has nothing to do with metaphysical necessity. And if a theist posits God as a metaphysical necessity, that is not special pleading.
No,
what a special pleading would be, let me explain to people. What special pleading would be is all things that are contingent require an explanation. God is contingent, but he doesn't. And they don't give a justification for why he doesn't. But that's not what the theist is doing.
Yeah, for special pleading, you have to have the two things that you're talking about need to be grouped in the same under the same subject. And for something to not be special pleading, they can be different things by the very nature of their definitions. If God is defined as a necessary being, it is not special pleading to call him a necessary being. That's how he's been defined.
Right.
It's the same argument that I made in my I did the worst arguments against God video on my channel, and it's an atheist YouTube channel. So it was just basically me going, hey, look, you guys think that these are wonderful gotcha arguments. They're not. Polish them, come back with better ones, please. There's better ways to go about this. I got so much fucking flack for that video, and I'm just like, do none of you read?
You're right, though.
It's like, do none of you read?
I don't see any flaw with that, though.
I've been thinking of doing my own video on that, but it's like,
if you want to do it, you will get a lot of flack, especially if you're established in any way, shape, or form.
Dude, I'm getting flack just over my debate with GE. Apparently, I'm a theist and all sorts of crap because I think Jesus was a historical person.
Yeah, I don't understand either. I know a lot of people.
Be a historicist and be an atheist. The Jesus's historicity holds no bearing on his divinity.
None.
Zero.
Well, one of my favorite scholars, Michael Bird, he had a debate with Bart Ehrman, and he was asked about mythicism. And he said, you can believe that Jesus was a historical person and be an atheist. You just can't be a stupid atheist.
I don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to mythicism things. I'm okay with Jesus existing. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I don't think Carrier's argument is all that great. Excuse me. But even he admits it's not that great. I mean, he only puts it at like 67%. And by the way, I'm going to be trying to go down and visit Richard Carrier on the 29th, or maybe even go down a day early. I don't know. But I really want to get down there. I'm trying to plan out the logistics because I really want to go hang out with the guy. I think it'd be fun. And he's only going to be like 2 hours away, so it's possible. If I do, I'm going to do a location thing with my laptop.
Sweet. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
That would be cool. I would definitely like to see that.
Yeah. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight either. If someone someone came back with a bunch of evidence and they're like, yeah, it looks like Jesus wasn't a historical figure. Fine. Doesn't bother me. I just think that it points to a historical figure right now.
That's kind of where I sit as well. And even like there was a video I made called Granting the Premise, where I argued that you can grant a historical Jesus, you can grant everything including the resurrection, and you still don't have Jesus being tied to a god or the divine. You still have other avenues you can take that conversation that are not just that one. So feeling like giving a little bit of ground is going to kill your position is an incorrect way to go about any type of debate here.
Yeah,
grant as much as you need.
I'm glad you phrased it that way. The reason being is that one, atheism has nothing to do whether you believe Jesus existed or not. Absolutely not even. There's no correlation between the two. Him existing the atheist has to do with belief of God, and if Jesus is divinity, then that's different. But him existing, nothing to do with atheism. Yeah. But I like the way you put it by giving ground. I have seen recently so many atheists unwilling to give any ground. Even like today, somebody was like, "Oh, well, you're arguing like a theist because this theist is talking about the physics, blah blah blah, and the universe." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but that's physics. It's like he's not wrong. Why are you unable to give ground to a theist when he's actually saying something right? I don't understand this."
I would just like to also point out that somebody in the chat said too much anime on wall. Cool, I'll put more up on the wall.
All right. Well, anyways, let's kind of wrap it up a little bit. People got questions. Anybody speak now, forever hold your peace. Well, somebody says, I don't think Kerry is admitting his argument's that great. Well, actually, he kind of did. He actually even said that he realizes that it's not like a foolproof argument. That it's not like he's arguing there's no possible way Jesus existed. So
no, he's arguing from probabilities. That's all, and that's actually all Bayesian analysis is. Even if people argue that he's not using Bayes' theorem correctly, which I've seen a lot of people do, it's still just an argument of, for, and around probabilities. It's not a hard stance argument.
Right. And honestly, my problem with trying to argue probabilities, especially in regards to history, is how probable would it be that a random Austrian corporal would end up rising to the head of the Third Reich and then cause a war that killed 60+ million people?
After being in prison in that same country.
Yeah. Let's talk about the probability of that happening, but it did. But yeah, as you can see, I don't agree with Carrier a lot, as indicated by all of my notes.
Yes.
But even still, I don't know why people are dogging on you for the discussion with the GE. I thought both you guys made good points. I thought you both were articulate. I don't understand the topic one way or another to even weigh in on it, right? People have this weird thing when it comes to me, and I don't understand it. I'm the first person to admit I don't know certain things about certain things because I have no interest in it. Mythicism is one of those things. I don't know shit about it. And that's why I don't weigh in on it, right? I mean, why fault me for not weighing in on that and not taking any position on it?
Yeah, I don't know enough I have no interest in chemistry. I have no position on it.
You don't think chemistry exists?
Okay, I think that chemistry is a thing. I just don't really care because it's just not interesting to me.
It's just fancy alchemy. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's just alchemy that works.
Yeah.
That's all.
Pretty much.
It's alchemy that's no longer trying to turn lead into gold.
Scottish Gamer says even Aaron Ross said that a Jesus may have existed. Yeah. I mean, again, I'll steel man him. I'll grant that. I don't see any reason not to. And I think people need to start steel manning their opponents more because, again, when you start throwing shit out there like just a fallacy's name and not getting it right, or just saying, oh, well, somebody's trolling, or oh, you're just wrong. You're not doing anybody's any favors here. You're not adding to the dialogue. You're not having anything of value that people want to listen to, in my opinion, because any idiot can do that. I mean, oh, straw man, you're strawing me. You're straw manning me. Now I do get straw man though. That's the funniest part. A lot.
See.
Just rebut with, okay, that's the fallacy because you just dismissed my argument on the basis that you think it's fallacious.
They don't even know
while I'm wrong.
I know a lot of people that don't get the fallacy.
I've seen it on the Non Sequitur show when somebody didn't get it and they said that naming a fallacy is a fallacy, and I'm like, wait, what? No, what?
No, the fallacy is basically saying that you're saying that the conclusion is wrong because the argument doesn't follow, but that doesn't make sense because the argument may not be a good argument, and it may not follow. It could be a non sequitur, but the conclusion still could be true.
You can have a true conclusion, completely malformed argument. Adolf Hitler. What is it? Germany exists. Germany has had rulers. Therefore, Adolf Hitler exists and ruled Germany at one point. Well, that's a malformed argument. That doesn't get you there, but the conclusion's still fucking true.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, like I said, I got to wrap this up. We're gonna have the non sequitur show tonight with the Messianic Manic. That should be pretty fun. I've been talking to him for a little bit today. We might get Wayne Fillmore in. I don't know yet, but I think he wants to have a conversation. Yeah, I love Wayne. I think he might have a conversation. Want to have a conversation with a theist, and Wayne is available tonight, so we might have a surprise and bring Wayne in. We'll see where it goes. We're kind of just playing this by ear tonight, and of course, it's dealing with Igtheism, and so I'm going to be kind of, I think, running it a little bit tonight because we know how much Kyle loves that philosophy. And by the way, we're getting a new shirt out. It has Kyle and I on it. It's pretty good actually. It's cute. I mean, if you like our faces on your boobs.
I do.
I know. No. But
now,
anyway,
Plato and Aristotle on mine, so
you have to see the shirt that Kyle designed. I think it's better.
I'm fat, so I just end up having pizza sauce on my boobs. Does that count?
I thought that was your nipple.
It could be. It could be. Areola.
Yeah, exactly. See, you caught that. So, did you guys before we go? Did you guys like the Golden Nuns?
Oh, that was great.
Shannon and Paul seemed very excited.
Shannon was legit. I think she didn't stop crying for like 4 hours. She was so happy, and well deserved. I mean, and I couldn't believe how dressed up everybody got.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually we might end up just turning this entire area to where there's, some level of class to it, or there'll just be dumpster fires all day. One or the other. I'm okay with both.
Dude, dumpster fires are great.
Yeah, I'm okay with classy dumpster fires.
That's why we have Reds.
Exactly. But it was nice to recognize people. I thought that everybody did a great job on that. We wrote the things, and David McGinnis did a wonderful job on making the little things come down and the whole presentation. That was just amazing. I mean, I got to get better at CGI. The last thing I made in CGI was that dumpster fire thing with Red's Rhetoric's logo, which I thought was pretty good, and we used it. We still use it in our opener, but I got to do more CGI stuff.
I need to learn CGI.
I have absolutely zero knowledge of CGI.
Well, actually, it was Cirrus that got me into a hit film. I was using Blender before, and Blender's powerful as shit, but it's very, very complicated to use.
It's a horrible editing program. It's very good for.
I never used it for part. That would be ridiculous. I know you can, but it's hard enough just to even use it for CGI.
Yeah, no, that's why I suggested hit film, because I'm just like, it's basically just the Adobe suite without having to pay the price of the Adobe suite.
No, hit film is pretty intuitive. I learned it pretty quickly. Yeah. I wish I kind of had more of a full version of it, but yeah, one of these days. Brian says, I love Blender. Yeah, no, Blender is great, dude. No, I mean, Blender is a very powerful program. Unfortunately, the learning curve is ridiculously high. I mean, the only thing that I think is harder to learn probably would be Adobe, because I tried learning Adobe stuff and I was like, I'm done. Forget it. No way. But Blender is a very high learning curve.
I'm just a cheapskate. If it's above like $20 for the program, you can count me out.
Hitfilm's free.
Yeah, the free version.
100% free.
Now you're very limited in what you can do, and I'm gonna see why people can get the expansion pack, so you can do so much more. But you can still do pretty much a lot of stuff just with the basic version.
You can actually fudge a lot of effects with it. There's stronger versions of, like, there's a lot of blurs that you have access to with the paid version. But you can actually simulate most of those blurs with the free effects as long as you know
just more complicated to do.
Yeah.
But like the intro for like DEF CON 1 Science, I did all that in hit film. So it just takes several hours to do that shit.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize how much time goes into making just even like 10 seconds of CGI. I mean, that's like 4 or 5 hours worth of work.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
I just Sony Vegas for my stuff.
I have Sony Vegas, but I don't use it. I mean, I should check it out more. I have a cheap version of it. I don't think
Yeah,
it's
me
the
too.
full
I have
version.
like a $30 variant from back in like 2014 or something.
I'm still using Photoshop CS4.
Dude, CS4 was great.
It was. It just didn't have the really strong feathering effects that I wish it did.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I appreciate you guys showing up. I think we kind of like suss this out a little bit. So at least going in tonight, I'm going to have a little bit more to bring to the table as far as my position on Igtheism. Because I'm not going to like die on a hill whether it is a viable position or not. I just want to be able to like discuss it and bring up some of the counterpoints to maybe somebody who holds the Igtheist position. Because I think that the MMM he identifies as an Igtheist. So
okay.
Anybody? What I think is funny is he doesn't think agnosticism is viable. From what I remember from one or two of his videos.
Oh, okay. Now I really want to talk.
Yeah, so we're gonna be discussing that tonight a little bit too. So it might be a good dumpster fire, and I like the guy.
Not assigning a truth value is not a viable position.
I don't.
But having but being non-cognitivist about something that you're trying to argue about is definitely viable.
Well, I've been at this a long time, and I noticed that certain people, just for some reason, they have misconceptions. And one thing about agnosticism is they don't understand really what it entails. They don't understand the word means different things. And, I get that a lot of them do think that has to do with knowledge, and in a lot of ways it does. But when it comes to propositions, it doesn't mean knowledge. And I think that they think that agnosticism somehow is this weird middle ground between belief and non-belief. And that needs to be dispelled, because it's not between belief and non-belief. It's between belief is true and belief is false. That's a huge difference.
Yep.
Because at that point, agnosticism would be a form of non-belief.
Well, of course it is.
Like that's why it's not a position between the two things.
Right. I don't. That's what I keep bringing up. I'm like, wait a minute. How is agnosticism between belief and non-belief when agnostics are non-believers? If Gnostics were believers, they'd be theists.
Yeah.
But then people go, well, if you're a non-believer, you're an atheist. No, you're not. Shut the fuck up. I'm so getting tired of that.
If we're arguing philosophy, no, you're not. If we're arguing colloquially, then go ahead and use a loosey-goosey term. I use it on my channel all the time. Fuck it. But if we're arguing philosophy, that doesn't hold.
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's wrap this up. You're wrong. That's gonna be our motto. Just you're wrong. So it might be pretty interesting tonight, because if we start talking about agnosticism, I'm going to bring the big guns, right?
Well, yeah.
So anybody from the live chat, ask now, forever hold your peace about Igtheism or anything else. You got about 2 minutes before I end this. But I appreciate you guys watching. We had about 80 people watching. That's great, especially on a spur of the moment thing like this. I know I've been not having as many hangouts as I usually do. I'm going to try to rectify that. It's just been so busy with getting guests and other things for non sequitur that it's a lot of work.
I can definitely agree with that. I started when I started doing uploads on my channel daily, like edited and live streams. I have learned that the only sleep that I've gotten in the last 2 weeks has been 2 hours at a time. I have not gotten a lot of sleep.
Oh, I'm up all hours. Kyle and I just talk all the time. Just we'll like, hey, Steve, message. Can you send a message to this person, or Steve, what's going on here? And we always will try to keep in touch on what's plans are, because it takes a coordinated effort. And I'm like tonight, the MMM is a guest that I booked, right? And then I also got a few, like 5 other things in the pot, trying to get confirmations for. So. Okay, last minute question. Steve, why you got to change shit? Because, I'm not going to wear the same underwear every day. That's why. I mean, I understand that
Have you heard of a washing machine?
Yeah, I understand that you can like turn it inside out and backwards, and like you get like 4 days use out of it, I guess, that way. I'm not one of those people.
Sounds like a good way to get a yeast infection.
Yeah, do that in the military. See how well that works out for you.
Yeah, no, that's a quick way to get a rash. Really, really bad burning red one. Don't do it.
Welcome to Jock Itch.
The man speaks from experience. I never really had a problem with that. What I had a problem with was in boot camp, wearing these very thick wool socks with the boots, and you sweat. And man, I'm telling you, you get Atlas foot. It's just, I don't know a single person that didn't make it through boot camp without some form of athlete's foot, because you're just sweating your ass off, marching and running, and you're always wearing these thick wool socks and boots, and yeah, it's miserable. I don't know how we got. I don't know how did we go from ichtheism to jock itch and foot fungus?
You invited me on, and everything went downhill from there.
Non sequitur, but all right, guys. We'll stay on the non sequitur show tonight, and thanks for watching. Good night.